Hello and welcome to the video review and bonus materials from Westeros.org for episode 2 of season 5, The House of Black and White. And we are going to be opening up as usual with a little bit of background material, which today was going to be...
a little bit with the elections of the Lord Commanders.
Exactly. And then we're going to do our highs and lows before we go into the story-by-story coverage of the whole episode.
So regarding elections, obviously this episode had the big election for Lord Commander, and we see Jon Snow elected thanks to Samwell just convincing everyone, just like, hey, he makes sense, and then, not everyone, obviously, but a little under half supported him.
A little less complicated than in the novels, but
a little bit, yeah. The novel gives a much more sort of complicated picture. The method of choosing is a little bit different. But the basic idea that the Men of the Watch elect is correct. One of the details that we see in this episode is where Samwell points out, kind of randomly, that Osric Stark was the youngest ever Lord Commander, elected at the age of 10. Now this fits with a detail in the novels that is expanded on. Samwell's recording, sort of studying past elections, trying to see how they worked out, and he discovered
precedents really for the situation and sort of bolstering Jon's confidence
about the fact that he had been elected, because this is obviously from A Feast for Crows after the election, and it's Samwell who finds, like, he was wondering, like, is Jon the youngest ever Lord Commander? And he found 4 other Lord Commanders who were actually younger than him, and every single one of them was a son or brother, or uncle, or bastard of Lord Stark. They were all Starks. So Jon is very much keeping in tradition. The Starks have a special relationship with the Night's Watch. They have been...
They provided by far the most
support.
Lord Commanders as well, I think.
I would guess.
Yeah.
They have...
Given those examples, I would suspect that that's the case.
Yeah, so they have this long history. They have this long connection. So... I wish they had just got a little further, or had Samwell toss out that little detail additionally, and just so you could kind of see. But it's not just a random fact; it's part of a continuity of Stark and Night's Watch connections. Highs and lows. Perhaps some will find it surprising that we consider Meereen the high for this episode. This is another kind of introductory episode, so it's not like we're over the moon over the episode, but of all its parts, the Meereen part stood out, because to me what stood out for it is the fact that it tells a complete narrative in that episode. You start with a hunt for a son of a harpy, he's captured, you have the debate in which something is decided, you have the twist where someone defies what was decided, and you have the resolution, which creates more complexity. And I think that was very neatly written by the writers on a number of aspects. One of the aspects I liked best was the actual council scene, because you see all the people around the table. You see Dany, you see Mosador, you see Hizdar, Barristan, Daario. All these people are interacting with one another and presenting a point of view, an agenda, a view of how things work. In particular, Mosador and Hizdar. They're obviously the sort of essential characters in the Divide, representing Meereen, sort of both sides, the former slaves and the former slavers. So I thought that was really quite excellent.
And it feels like very much like it kept with the tone of the novels, in that these are some of the problems that Dany faces. There's a paranoia among the former slaves that they're going to be enslaved again.
Yes.
And the former masters and the former slave owners very much would prefer to return to their way of life as much as possible. So there are these conflicting agendas, and she has to try and please everyone. And so I think it was a good way of showing what she's dealing with in Meereen.
Exactly. I would also say that the other thing it does, of course, is obviously a way to build up the Son of a Harpy and in particular through this, what happens with the execution of Mosador, showing that it's not all hugs and kisses between Dany and the freedmen. She is the Misa, she is the mother. They are kind of devoted to her, but they can be very angry if she wrongs them. That hissing, the riot that breaks out. including them throwing stones at her, shows the fragility that, yeah, she freed them. Yes, they're extremely grateful, but they have expectations of what that means. They have expectations that they're going to be treated a certain way. They have expectations that they are going to be... And this kind of underlines the fact that the structure of a society, the mores of a society, don't conform to what she believes in. I mean, most of her said that, with the Barristan. I don't know what place old Sir comes from, but I hope it is a better place. And he says, like, this is not our way. What we understand, what the slavers understand, what we understand is blood, and fairness and trials. This is not how we do it.
It's obviously showing that it isn't just the slave owners or the former slave owners that are very reluctant to change. Yeah. It's those who were enslaved as well. They very much feel like, well, they're set in their ways. We kind of have to continue this, or we're just going to end up enslaved again. And so there's a very good illustration of that vicious circle of.
And I was saying also, I mean, this focuses the conflict as being very much an internal, a strife within Meereen as being the big danger. In the novel, strife within Meereen is part of a story, but like the freedmen, there's no question that the freedmen are 100% with Dany. There's never anything where there's a concern with their loyalty. Whereas the other side of the threat is an external threat, a threat from Yunkai, Sellsword forces gathering, Volantis sending a fleet against her. There's a great array of enemies that are as much a part of the problem. Now, this is disappearing. Clearly, it's something
from the previews that have shown up, it's clear that it's going to be largely an internal affair.
Yeah, and it's understandable for budgetary reasons. They have to kind of find places to cut. And so this is, as I said in our review from the previous episode, this is a choice where they've taken a shortcut, where they have cut out a part of a story and come up with a way to fill it in.
There is one problem with it, I'll say, in the sense that part of the reason that Dany in the novels takes her time and stays and tries to sort things out in Meereen is that she feels very responsible for the people there. If she feels that, well...
They don't want her.
They don't want her.
Even the freedmen don't want her around.
She would have had much less incentive if she feels like it's not just that I can't change the opinion of the slavers. I can't even change the opinion of the former slaves. They just feel like it's all the same thing, and I can't get through to any of them. So it does weaken that side. I don't think they're going to linger at it, but it's
a good point, because obviously things that we've seen, suggestions that were coming forward, suggest that her path is going to be very similar to her path in the novels. And does that really make sense if the freedmen are more concerned about her protecting and supporting them, for her to make some of those choices she makes? Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if they deal with it, because now that raises a concern with me, because this episode, there have been things that have felt like very clumsy, forced decisions to get to the shortcut. And I thought this was working, but now I'm concerned.
It just popped into my head now that we were thinking about it.
We'll see. It's entirely possible that they will smooth it over.
It's good so far, but they could hit a rocky patch on moving her from point A to B with that changed motivation. This should have been the high in some senses, because I'm sure it hasn't gone unnoticed by anyone watching our videos. We really like Dorne. So the introduction of Dorne, not just a Dornish character, but actually going to Dorne, well, that should have been something we really, really liked. And, they picked some lovely locations. Can't say anything. It looks quite fabulous. Obviously not spot on, right? No. But it captures very nicely, I think, the atmosphere of it.
The Real Alcazar in Seville is in Andalusia. It's the area that obviously inspired a lot of, both in its history, its sort of geography, its climate, inspired Dorne. So that aspect is, I cannot fault them. They actually, one of the things they released, I don't think you've seen it yet, actually, is after the second episode, one of the pieces is just about Dorne and filming in the water gardens, and they talked about the fact that no one has ever been allowed to film a drama.
I mean, it's a World Heritage Site.
It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so it is something very rare, and they've been very privileged to do it. And it's hats off to them for, on the production side. There's very little to ever fault them for. They go the extra mile.
But the scene that we see is based on the scene on the first Dornish chapter in A Feast for Crows. And this chapter, Captain of the Guards, happens to be one of our absolute favorite chapters in the novels. I tend to put it as this is George channeling Guy Gavriel Kay to some degree, which is, as far as I'm concerned, extremely high praise. I love George's writing in general, but Kay is one of the absolutely great stylists within the fantasy genre, and he has an amazing way with the motions.
Amazing way with creating a quality of sort of elegiac melancholy. And George has always been a writer with great talent with atmosphere. I mean, the Red Wedding, which on the show we felt failed to approach the amazing atmosphere of the same chapter in the novels, for example. George can create some amazingly evocative moods.
And he's good with the melancholy. But I think in Ice and Fire, perhaps, the melancholy it really started coming out in A Feast for Crows.
Oh, yeah.
That's where it really came to the foreground, the sort of the aftermath of everything. And this chapter is very much about that. In fact, I'm going to start by reading a little bit from that chapter before we go into discussing why it was so terribly adapted in some ways. And I think I am going to go...
It's a shorter bit.
Yes, I'm going to go towards the end. And this is where, in the novels, it's not Arya who comes to see Dorne. It's, in fact, Obara, the eldest of the Sand Snakes. And she gets let in by Arya Hota, and they have a similar conversation. She's being quite aggressive about the matter. And then this is just before she's... is after she's talked, right? No, right. Yeah, she has tried to get access, and then she asks if Dorne is aware that Oberyn's dead, and Hota tells her that yes, he had a bird, and then this is a little paragraph just describing the arrival of that bird. Death had come to Dorne on raven wings, writ small and sealed with a blob of hard, red wax. Caliot must have sent what was in that letter, for he had given it to Hota to deliver. The prince thanked him, but for the longest time he would not break the seal. All afternoon he'd sat with the parchment in his lap, watching the children at their play. He watched until the sun went down, and the evening air grew cool enough to drive them inside. Then he watched the starlight on the water. It was moonrise before he sent Hota to fetch a candle, so he might read his letter beneath the orange trees in the dark of night. There's this sort of captures this chapter and the opening. There's such poetry to it, and there's such beauty to it, such the melancholy, the elegiac nature of it, and
there's none of this.
They open really cold.
It's like you're very directly.
It's very directly. It's immediately a confrontation, and we're going to have some things to say about that as we go through the story by story. But we feel that there was time that they could have taken from other elements that didn't need to be in this episode to give Dorne that introduction that it deserved, and to take a moment to not just leap into action, leap into a confrontation, leap into an argument. Just try and do it with a little bit of subtlety, a bit of more emotional depth for once.
I think the thing I look at is like when they introduce new regions like Dragonstone or even Braavos in the fourth season. Braavos got 3 different scenes totaling a number of minutes, and Dorne gets 2 minutes, and that's it. Yeah. It's so fast. It is so brief that it feels like they're. And I know we'll discuss this later. There are certain scenes that I think they could very easily have dropped without losing anything whatsoever to flesh this story out. And the other aspect of our dislike is the aggressive Ellaria, the vengeful.
They flipped the roles here. The what she says is quite close to what Obara says,
but worse than what Obara says, because Obara wants to kill Tywin Lannister, and she wants to go and attack Old Town as to get, as to start a war. That's an opening move in a war. And that's it. Alaria says, give me Myrcella and I will send her piece by piece to her mother. I mean, right off the bat. So what people have said is actually Alaria, because people say, oh, well, Alaria's taken sort of the Arion role, and she kind of sort of has, and she kind of sort of took the Obora aggressive.
No, doesn't, for a moment consider.
No. She's sort of kind of in a sense of plotting something.
Yeah.
And then she's kind of got Obora's lines. A lot of her lines are really from Obora in that first chapter. And then she's also kind of the female Darkstar, because Darkstar, this Dornish knight of House Dane, is the one who proposes, if you want to start a war, fastest way is just kill the girl.
Yeah.
So they've got this weird amalgamation of the character, and I think
they took a character and did this with.
I had to find a controller. Wiser. Yes.
Yes, they took a character who, in the novels, is very much like Catelyn. She's not somebody who wants vengeance. She is, in fact, she speaks against it in A Dance with Dragons. She talks about the futility of vengeance, and to use that character
from a particular angle, because the angle both for Catelyn and for Alaria is a mother's view on the futility, because vengeance breeds more vengeance. And she says, if you go out and kill a Lannister and they come back and kill one of you, will my youngest daughters, the ones who are still children, when they grow up, will they go out to seek vengeance for your blood, and then will they in turn get killed? It's a brutal, ugly cycle. And the show did this to Catelyn. This is the thing. This is a pattern now of the writers.
Kill them all.
Kill them all. It's a very famous scene, very sternly, very well delivered, but it's complete opposite of the Catelyn of the books.
And with Catelyn, the thing is that, she's not supposed to turn into that until after the Red Wedding, in a sense that Lady Stoneheart, that is the sort of the opposite of what Catelyn was in life.
Yes. Well, that's the thing.
The tragedy of it, that she's turned completely into something that she never was.
I recently saw an article on Forbes saying one of the things they should leave behind from George is, resurrection, because then you lose any concern for characters, because he could just be resurrected.
Yeah, because they come back so fine and dandy all the time.
No, and George said so. He always said, Gandalf should stay dead, but then he said, well, what if he came back a brain-eating zombie?
It shouldn't have come back improved, was it? At least his sort of...
There has to be a cost.
A cost.
There has to be something damaging about this effect. So anyways, this is a distraction. The thing is, it's a pattern. They've done it more than once. And to me, it's a thematic point. It's a point that George raises about vengeance. And there's just basically no one on the show who speaks against it now. No. It's just... Dorne kind of seems to be doing it, but we have our suspicions that if they follow the books, it may not be so clear cut. I don't know. I was very, very disappointed in this. And the thing is, if they had done what I thought and cut out a couple of less useful scenes, or tightened up a couple of scenes, and gave Dorne more time, what they could have done is, instead of having Alaria be the character, they could have introduced the Sand Snakes. Now, these are the brand new characters, the Daughters of Oberyn. We've kind of heard of them already from the previous season. They've been building them up. They've been putting out material about them.
Not the best material.
And unfortunately, it's not the best material, and people have come off, other reviewers, not just us, negatively to how we're seen. Now, mind you, I'm skipping ahead here, but we'll see them for one episode in the first 4 episodes. And it's all very brief. They don't do a lot of the talking. And they come off in a certain way that I think EW's reviewer, who gave the first 4 episodes like a B+, said like B-movie bad girls. And, people say, Fox Force 5. Now, the funny thing is, I kind of always said that comparison. But when the Sand Snakes are introduced in novel, each one comes to Dorne separately, the 3 eldest. And each has a way about how she approaches revenge. And each of them has, we get a little history, and we get a little bit of relations about that they have lives outside of this.
And actually, there's a really nice bit in that opening chapter right before the one where Hota is thinking about Obara, how she's, she's always very hasty. She's always walking hurriedly, and she remembered Oberyn telling Dorne at some point that she's chasing after something that she can't get because she's. Her past is a bit different than her sister's in the novels.
Exactly.
She's the one who's, her mother's a whore, and they've done away with that to some degree.
But let's not get...
But I think you get that characterization, and it's all very...
So, they may be thin characters, but you have a sense that there's more to them, and the way they use them in those first 4 episodes, they're very scanted. They're much flatter, and it's hard to imagine that we're going to get a lot out of them. Maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe it'll be a whole episode devoted to them. I doubt it. So that is our disappointment. It was, we know David and Dan. I mean, I know from bits and pieces I've heard, they loved Dorne in the books. They really wanted to make use of it. They were really happy. And I know from what they've said now that they really like Indira Varma. I think she's a good actress. I know that you disagree.
Yeah.
I know you bounced off her performances in certain roles. Eloria, it's a writing thing. You can't really blame her necessarily if it's not being written how you want.
Well, I've seen her twice. I've seen her in Rome, and I've seen her in this.
You saw her in Kama Sutra too, right?
I don't really remember much about her other than being naked, but that's probably what
I certainly saw her in Kama Sutra.
Yes, and that's why you think she's a good actress?
Well,
I rest my case.
It's a very memorable film, and not just... I'll say it's not just because of the prurient qualities of it, which are very nice, but it's also the fact that there's a mood to it, and there's an atmosphere to it, and there's a certain fine, I know you call some outrage. I mean, there's something exotic about it. Feel free to hate me, I don't care. But there's something. So if you want to say is Orientalism, it is evocative of something foreign and something other, and it does it in a very good way. And it was filmed under very difficult circumstances, with the fact that they had to lie about they lied about the title, and they kept the film hidden from authorities because it wasn't going to be approved in India. Anyways, I like her. I like her, but we've met her already. Yeah. We could wait on seeing her again a bit later. When we get to episode 4, I'll spell out the scenario I've got in my head of how this should have gone. But those are our highs and lows. So we are next on to the story by story, and we'll talk about Arya first. She kind of starts this. Great to see Braavos again. The visual effects, can't blame anything with it. But it is problematic, but this episode of Arya's entry into the story feels kind of artificially padded out. And I can see it's a structural thing. It is the fact that if they did it as in the book, it really feels like you should just do it all in one scene and that's it. And obviously they don't want to go further than that in this episode. But it stretches things out in a really odd way, and not really successfully, like her sitting there repeating the names over and over and then going off and then hunting pigeons and then he shows up afterward. It feels...
The challenge that they replace, because the challenge to entry is very different in the novels. She's let into the House of Black and White with no problem, but once in, she's tested in a way.
Yeah.
This test of, we're not going to let you in, it feels a bit cliche to some extent. It sort of brings up all sorts of associations in my head. I can't quite pin down anything specific, but it feels like a very cliche thing to do. Like, we're not going to let you in, you're going to have to prove yourself in some way, and then we'll come and find you, basically.
Yeah, I don't know. What I would have done personally was, if you had to split into two, extend the piece with the captain, the Braavosi captain. And there's a particular element in that story, in that chapter, in which crewmen are going around giving her little gifts, a little silver spoon, knickknacks, various little things, and they're telling her, remember her name. Like, remember my name, say my name, remember my name. And this is important. It has something to do with what's coming for her.
I don't think they're necessarily fleshing out that angle, perhaps.
I would have gone, I think, going that and then having the captain take her through Braavos and maybe talk a little bit, mention the Iron Bank. It's a great thing to mention. Maybe mention something, a throwaway line that they say some king had been here looking for money connect it to last season. And then finish with the House of Black and White in distance, and then we leave them rowing kind of against the current or whatever to explain why it takes so long. So I don't know.
A second scene.
And then a second scene with her there in the actual entry. And it would have been cool. I mean, in the book, look, I can see the problem they have here. In the book, the Arya of the book is a child who's, eaten grubs and worms and things to survive in the war-stricken countryside after Yoren is killed and the company is scattered. So when the kindly man, as he's called in the book, unveils himself, or rather this priest who's questioning her unveils himself, or trying to dissuade her unveils himself, it's a skull for a head. And there's grave worms worming their way through his eye sockets and the nose. And her response, it doesn't faze her. She grabs at the worm and tries to drop it in her mouth to eat it, and then it melts away in shadow. And then suddenly she sees the man, and now his face has changed. He's the kindliest old man she's ever seen. And but no one's ever done that before. And so it looks like you're hungry.
No one's ever tried to eat my worm before.
Yeah. So
that's clearly something
it's very magical.
And the fellow didn't look very kindly.
No. Old Man Hoba. This is the name apparently that they gave to him according to...
Is that some Braavos accent for hobo? Or hobo? I don't know.
I don't mind, but...
No, it's just that kindly old man translated into, we're going to find someone who looks really creepy, sort of.
A little stern and not nice, I guess. I don't know. I can see the problem of having Maisie do it because it feel like that's
she's too old already.
She's too old, and she hasn't gone for the same things as her character, so it feels very childish for her to do something like that. Because Arya is a child, and this Arya, it's hard to remember that she's a child at this stage. I
think she's gotten over that part.
So I can, but I still at least would have wanted them to do a different split and stick a bit more to the book because this feels there's some artifice here, and I mean
the idea that why does he let her in after he
presumably because she's ready to kill them for her pigeon or for her sword, and it's the fact that she's proves that she is a killer.
It doesn't really jive with because that's not what they it doesn't really jive with the stated goals of the House of Black and White's servants in the novels.
True.
They're not really looking for that sort of killer, are they?
They want people who can kill, but for reasons quite different from why Arya is willing to kill.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is part of that. It is part of a story as well. That the fact that what they think she wants is not necessarily what
but would he let her in based on the fact that she's showing herself willing to kill for something that he doesn't approve her killing for?
Well, defending herself. I mean, she's alone against three guys. I don't know, but I can see your point. It's just awkward. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't as happy with it as I thought I would be, and I don't mind the idea that they just make him Jaqen, because in the novels he's not. The kindly man is someone else. Jaqen is around, but not.
It's also very doubtful that in fact a faceless man can retake.
Well, I don't even want to. That's speculative. We don't know.
Well, in the novel anyway, he says that Jaqen is gone. That identity has served its purpose.
But does it mean we can? Is it a choice or is it a fact of how it works? I don't know. But in any case, it's a
bit so.
I would have liked to see it tighten because I think maybe if they just did it as a one scene, like right towards the end, like people are waiting for Arya, have someone mention Braavos. Stannis mentioning how he got the money from the Iron Bank and Braavos to get over here and setting up something else later. Yeah, that could have worked. And then Arya is just one scene, maybe. But so it goes. Next we will move. Next scene. This is Brienne, Sansa, Podrick, Littlefinger. It's all of them kind of this is a story. Coincidence, big coincidence that they all arrive, but this is in keeping with novels. In the inns, and I don't know, is this supposed to be the inn at the crossroad?
I think so.
If so, it's a very
popular inn.
It's the only inn for 100 leagues around, and it's right at a prime location, the crossing point between for the river road, getting to a trident, the King's Road. It's a major artery, so it's really well placed. Kind of like a Howard Johnson's. But
the heck is a Howard Johnson?
they were this chain of sort of food motel things that existed on sort of highways. There was an important Mad Men episode all about them. So, I don't know. So it's fine. I don't have a problem with this aspect. It's in keeping. These things happen in the books. You know, Tyrion and Catelyn, or Brienne in the novels arrives just before George and Biter arrive. It's not a big thing.
On the other hand, the way Brienne chooses to handle the situation is a bit more.
It is. The Brienne of the show is not the.
It's become clear that there are actually very few similarities between them in terms of how they view the world, how they act in certain situations. There's none of the naivety. There's none of the. I mean, she's, starting out, Brienne is Sansa in armor.
Sansa in armor is a great example. Brienne of Tarth, in A Clash of Kings, in A Storm of Swords, is Sansa in armor. She has the same naive, optimistic view of things.
Of chivalry, of how people
she
should
believes
behave.
in it, yes.
She really believes in it. A Feast for Crows obviously has some very hard lessons for her, but this Brienne is a lot more, a lot quicker to kill people.
She's a lot harder. She's a lot gruffer.
She's quicker to get into conflicts with people.
Hot-tempered. It's a very different character. Gwendolyn Christie plays it well. I just don't quite.
It's not as compelling.
It's not as compelling because, for me, I'm attracted to the novel's exploration of sort of chivalry and the reality of that.
When the image and the reality clash.
Yeah, so
there's very little of that on the show.
Yeah, so when she comes in and then Paul says there's like 10 of them, and her reaction is, let's go and confront them all.
Yeah. I'll try first to see if just Sansa will come with me, but she has to know.
And Littlefinger will let her. It's completely futile. It should be obvious. Like, if you think Sansa is a prisoner, you should wait for a chance to talk to her privately. Maybe they're going to take a room in the inn, or take some rooms, and you could find a way to...
And if you think she's there willingly, do you really think that she's going to change her mind because she's... No.
It has to be... So it's okay, well, Brienne on the show is also not the sharpest knife in the block, I suppose. But, at the least, she should have said, Pod... Go make a distraction. Start a fire in a stable. Something to try and thin the numbers out. Get these knights out of here. At least, maybe. It just felt so clumsy, and then she just manages to get away scot-free with an elbow here and then push there, and off she goes. And I don't know.
Nice action sequence.
The setup, the action sequence is good. I like the action sequence.
Other than, Pod's attempts at showing that he can't ride a horse because, well, anyone who rode a horse as badly as Pod did wouldn't have been on it, for any length of.
It was quite clear watching this. I immediately, as soon as this is a stunt double and they've CG'd on or they've done something, because it's a stunt double, and when the face shot, it's a CG face of Pod.
Because actually riding that badly
takes some skill. It takes some skill to not break your neck. No. So, but the action sequence is great. I particularly, her coming in last minute, cutting down the guy, fantastic. It felt, that moment, particularly the way it's just very rapid and poof, felt very sort of Shambra Japanese samurai film, as it's like the decisive blow, boom, done. And then the fight after, which I loved, is the detail. Actually, I didn't catch it the first time, but the second time, when she cuts down, he tries to block with the sword, and the sword breaks. Oof, keeper.
The Valyrian
shatters
steel,
it. The Valyrian steel. So I think this is the first time we've really clearly seen
the difference in Valyrian steel and that's a
so that was a great touch. So I like that. I like that aspect, and Brienne's stubbornness I can buy. Her refusal to accept it just because they don't want her doesn't mean her duty to Catelyn is done. She has to convince them.
Because she shows that in the books as well, in that she will keep trying.
So that I'm fine with. It's just the whole thing around it, and then Littlefinger and Sansa. I mean, Sansa is fine, perceptive. That's in keeping. She is picking up things.
But like every scene now with them is
a
him
lesson
pointing out.
oh, you're learning this.
It's
or
like, yes, it happens a lot in the novels. We said this last time. I know it happens a lot in the novels, but every scene is like, you know, being sneaky 101.
Yeah, and then obviously the marriage proposal. We won't talk about this right now. That's for a later episode.
I would rather not talk about it ever, but
yeah, I'll do a talking then. Cersei and Jaime, the threat from Dorne, and the reactions. I mean, Cersei and Jaime...
There is no threat from Dorne in the first place, in the books.
In the book, well... There is no actual threat to her.
There's not, nobody sending it. Yes, there's nobody sending an explicit threat to her. She just gets to be paranoid on her own.
Yes, but just because you think they're out to get you doesn't mean they aren't. And in this case, I mean, in the novels, and you know, Cersei, in this particular case, is right. They are out to get.
Well, not the people that she thought was out to get her necessarily.
No, not directly.
No.
I mean, she doesn't understand the full complexity of what's going on in Dorne. But the fact that there are Dorners who want to do harm to them, she's right.
Yeah.
But they really, what stands out for me is how they've kind of flipped around Jaime and Cersei. And it's so...
I mean, like they misplaced the real Jaime somewhere along the way to this season, I think. The fact that they have decided that, as we saw with the last season, where they have hot and torrid makeup sex in the last episode, flipping Jaime back completely from all of this. I've started to become a better Kingsguard and all the, you know, decisions that he had made about that in the novels. And no, here he's back with Cersei fully. And yes, Cersei was a little pissed off with him that he let out Tyrion, and Tyrion killed Tywin, and, you know, caused all sorts of complexities for them. But for the most part, apparently they're still, you know, mostly in each other's good graces, I would say. And this has apparently turned Jaime into Cersei of the novels.
Yeah, he's concerned about the secret of the children more, whereas in the novel he was, you know, when he first started King,
let's get married and tell everyone there are our kids.
Let them come at us. We'll kill them all if we have to. I mean, they could have done that, and they reversed it. And Cersei, I will say, in the previous review, I kind of critiqued how flat Cersei, how affectless Cersei. She just looks vaguely constipated, vaguely annoyed all the time. She shows a real fury, and I appreciated that with the threat to Marcella. So that's something. I mean, I felt like she really was let go, and just like, even if she's kind of going, our daughter and so on, that's, you know, that the real Cersei wouldn't make that slip. But
a little bit more.
More than that, I mean,
yes,
she's supposed to be chewing, like literally chewing the scenery, like grabbing things and gnawing on it, and...
Well, yeah, I mean, throwing things.
Well, surely, I guess just sweeping aside that box and knocking aside, that would have been a nice
a little more
gesture.
physicality.
Fine, fine, but that's a minor point, I don't...
But, yeah.
But Jaime, I mean, Jaime's, and I couldn't help myself, but Jaime's, you know, the idea of his ridiculous underhanded mission to Dorne. I can't help myself. I put it in my review. I don't think you saw that bit. I actually did 2 little puns. I don't know. I'm sorry, guys. It was late. I just couldn't help myself.
He's underhanded. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very clumsy. That's the thing. To me, it's so clumsy. Previous episodes talked about how they, the nameless enemies, the Tyrells, the Bartells, the Boltons, Freys, everyone is
like
down.
the whole city in particular seems to
now
be...
now that they're on top, everyone's going to want to tear them down. And his first
Tywin isn't there to protect them any longer.
Yeah, Tywin isn't there to protect them. The legacy's under threat. And its first thought on the fact, oh, well, here's one materializing for Marcella is, I have to expiate the sin of having Tywin killed and see that there's a mission to rescue her, but I have to personally lead me and one other dude.
Yeah. Never mind that in the novels, when Cersei sends him off, because it's Cersei sending him off somewhere in the novels, which she doesn't do here, nowhere near to Dorne.
No.
But he suggests that his place is here protecting Tommen, as in King's Landing.
Yeah.
But apparently he's going to trust that Tommen's just fine while he hurries off to Dorne to take care of Marcella. I mean, I
can understand his wanting to sort of expiate his sin and try and for what he did, but Jaime should
dear
be
Lord,
pragmatic enough. Hold on.
Yeah.
Well, let me finish.
Well, it's just
Should be pragmatic enough to understand, to know. I mean, he isn't up for this. If there's fighting, he is a liability. He can't do it himself. He has to trust someone else. There's a bunch of Kingsguard beside him. There's Braun, who could find him some excellent cell swords. There's all sorts of ways that he could launch and arrange the mission. But personally going when Tommen is in far greater need of sort of his interference from, interfering with Cersei. It just... And the other thing is by having it be his idea, they take away the fact that it was in a novel Cersei's idea, and it's a mean-spirited kind of thing of her where she wants to get rid of him, and she's very unpleasant towards him about it, and she sends him off to pacify the Riverlands.
we can't have Cersei be mean-spirited.
And it's yet another step of Cersei being...
And this is what I was saying, oh Lord, about, because Cersei does not send him off. They don't part on bad terms. This has certain implications for events later on.
Well, no, because if they want him to be in that place, they will have him be in that place, regardless if they didn't really build it up properly. That's the thing. But there's so many...
I just don't see him reacting the way he did in the novels. And
no, well, I don't either, but if they want him to get there, they will get him there.
They'll just shove him over there.
I don't know, that's the thing. They talked years ago. I was rereading this interview that I did with them in 2012, and they talked to me years ago. All these shows, like, just write year to year, and then I think he pointed out that the producers of Breaking Bad and Mad Men, he thought the showrunners, he thought they probably actually had a full beginning, middle, end. But the beauty of this was this series could run 8 or 9 years, 80 or 90 hours. That was back then in 2012. But we have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we kind of have his Bible. We know where things are going. And yet we come up to things where
they allow that what they want to happen dictate how a character is going to react.
When they don't set, they don't seem to be thinking 2-3 years ahead. They seem to be thinking a year at a time.
Oh, this season we want Jaime in this situation. Well, Jaime wouldn't do that. Well, we'll just shove him over there.
I mean, it feels like they come in and like last season, like they had this idea. We're gonna, we opened up with Lord Frey, and we're after the Red Wedding, and we are gonna be revisiting the Riverlands next season. So they thought back then that Jaime would be going to Riverlands, but then by the time they were done, they thought about it. Saying, well, we never have Dorne, but we can't have this character we've never met before be a point of view character there. So who can we send there? And it's Jaime. Gosh, so we have to drop that and we'll move him there. But wow, how do we get him there? And suddenly it's like they're not getting any benefit. They're getting very little benefit from having this Bible because they don't think that far ahead. I find it awkward. It's one of the things that takes away from what the show could be.
It makes it very shallow because one of the things that I absolutely hate when I watch TV shows in general, and which will turn me off from a show pretty quickly, is when I feel that characters go back and forth in their motivations and there is no strong... As in, I don't have a problem with, because, know some people will say that, well, Dany in A Dance with Dragons, ends up going backwards in her development in some ways. But it's an earned development in her case. There are reasons for it, and you can trace the path. But when characters just flip-flop, and you don't see how they got from one point to another in terms of how they're reacting to things, you lose all engagement with the characters, I feel.
Let's move on. Somewhat better. Cersei continues after this. But Qyburn scene with the dwarf's head, that's right out of the books. Qyburn is a little too open and public.
Can I have that head, please?
Can I have the head, please? And here's this monstrous big body under the wraps over there. And then
bring me all your severed heads.
The small council scene I thought was pretty effective. It's also drawn from the books. Qyburn is appointed Master of Whispers, and to the outrage of Pycelle. And
Pycelle's doing a good job of looking very outraged.
The big difference, of course, is that in the books, she expands the small council. she drops the titles of like master. Eventually, she's like master of coin, so she names them after Free Cities fashion, like just this year and treasurer and so on, because I mean the only master is going to be her. And she appoints a hand. That's the other thing. But she appoints Kevin Lannister, her uncle's good father-in-law, Sahara Swift, who is a lickspittle, a coward, and she's had a falling out with Kevin by this point.
She's tried to appoint Jaime. She's tried to appoint Kevin.
Yeah, and like Jaime said, no, this is ridiculous. I have no interest. The hand without a hand. And Kevin says, "Well, I'll be hand and regent if you take off to Castle Rock, or you stay here as regent and you let me name me Warden of the West and I'll Castle Rock." And it makes it very clear that he knows what's up with Jaime and Cersei.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem with we had her tell Tywin, and apparently it was a successful threat for some reason on the show that she could.
And if they have to tell you this outside of it, then it's not a successful threat because
Whereas in the novels, she doesn't really like to tell anyone that. And when Kevin confronts her and lets her know that I know what's up between you and your brother, that is quite effective in curbing her to some extent. On the other hand, she decides to get back at him by essentially getting a hostage in the form of his father-in-law.
So what they do, the thing I disliked was that they had the confrontation not be a private one, but a public one, public within the confines of a small council. So, and particularly Mace Tyrell witnessing this breach between Kevin and Cersei. Does that really fit what Kevin wants for the family?
Or Cersei, really. She should be smart enough
to head it off.
Yeah.
So that I felt, well, smart. I mean, yes, the care. I mean, she takes Kevin aside and talks to him privately. She takes Jaime aside and talks to him privately. She understands private and public.
Especially with her paranoia about the Tyrells.
Yeah, and here she doesn't seem to care how it looks to anyone. It's just, I'm getting this done. So that was a little bit disappointing. But I mean, it just weakened the Lannisters further. But yeah, let's move on to the next. We have Jaime and Bronn. It's filler. It's fluff. It's amusing fluff, but it's fluff.
I didn't even find it particularly amusing. I am very over Bronn in general. I think the sort of smartass
rogue kind of rough
light
guy.
Comedy. He's gone very far into the sort of light comedy, and his wife turned out to be more annoying than dim-witted, apparently.
Yeah,
I think that in the last season, when they have Tyrion talking about dim-witted Lollys Stokeward, I think they probably had an idea of a character that was closer to what we have in the novels, where
she's quite mentally challenged.
Mentally challenged. This girl is just vapid.
It's just vapid. Yeah. I found it amusing, but I could see, had I my choice, and again, speaking to what we discussed in the highs and lows, how if they could have just squeezed out some more time for Dorne, drop Lawless, have Bronn skipping stones and admiring his quote-unquote castle, and just have Jaime show up right off. That saves, I'm sure it saves like a minute of time at least. Yeah. I don't know. And then Jaime picking Bronn, I mean, it makes sense. He seems to be the most capable fighting man in King's Landing at this point in time. So, I mean, we don't know anything about the King's Guard, so we can't say. But he seems the most capable, certainly this kind of guy that Jaime would think would be perfect for sort of mission, because honor and chivalry don't matter to him. He'll just get the job done.
Yeah.
So that is fine, but I wish he just cut off the Lawless bit. All right, and then obviously this sets up Dorne again, and So Dorne, we already discussed in detail a lot of our problems with it and why it was our low, but we can say, I mean, both of us, we like Alexander Siddig in the role of Doran, or Doran.
Doran?
Well, it's, I don't know, I don't think I recalled... We witnessed George read one of his chapters, but I don't think he said Doran. I think it's the show. I don't know.
I'm not 100% there. It could be, but
it doesn't matter.
It just makes
to me,
think
we
Doran.
say Doran. Doran feels. I think Duran from Barbarella and Duran, who were named after the character from Barbarella. Any case, I liked him. I liked how he came across. I look forward to when we learned that he was cast. I enjoyed him. Particularly like films like Syriana. He's really good in that one. He had a small but a pretty well done role in Kingdom of Heaven. So I wish we had more of him. That's what I wish. We wish we had more of him.
He's obviously not quite as badly off as counterpart in the novels, in that he's supposed to be quite heavily afflicted by gout. In a lot of pain.
Yeah, constant pain.
He is wheelchair bound. That seems clear, or chair bound. I don't know.
Chair bound. Yeah, but it has wheels. Yes.
And also, I guess the water gardens are fairly different. It's in the sense that the idea is that what he's doing in the books is that he has all these children there, children from
various strata of society in Dorne and from
noble
outside
families
of Dorne.
in Dorne, commoners in Dorne, and various foreigners, and he likes to.
Not just him.
No, it's gone back. It's a tradition. Very interesting tradition.
Yes, a tradition started by. I could have just easily discussed the history of the water gardens, because that's an interesting bit of history, in which I'll lay it out for those who are following this and haven't actually read the books. The water gardens is this sort of palatial pleasure palace, right?
Not actually in Sunsbury.
Not in Sunsbury proper. It's a little distance from it, like half a day or whatever. And it was raised by Prince Meereen Martell. And he is the one who sort of brought Dorne into the Seven Kingdoms through a peace treaty with Daeron II, or Daeron the Good. And this agreement had been sealed by the marriage of Meereen to Daeron's sister, Daenerys, previous Daenerys. And he built the water gardens for her. And she is the one who surrounds herself with children at the water gardens. She brings children from all levels of society, and again, they opens up to people from foreign cities. So to mingle together, saying, these are the people that we rule for, that we try to protect. It's the children. We have to think of the children when we make our decisions, and when they are this age, they are this children. They are not noble and peasant. They are not blacksmith and knight. They are just children. And the mingling together actually gives... Dorne has an interesting thread of egalitarianism. It's obviously a holdover from the Roynish, I think, culture,
they
their
have
attitudes.
An interesting sense of their sort of nationality and the commonality of their...
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Arya says it here, and it is from the book. The people, the commoners are crying for war to avenge Oberyn. I don't really recall... prior to this latest book, seeing any commoners calling for war. Well, prior to Dorne, and then in Dance of Dragons, we finally meet they're not quite common, but the clans want to avenge and do right by the Ned.
But I mean, in some ways, Dorne and the North are similar in that way.
They have
a very strong loyalty to their ruling family, and there seems to be a sense that we take care of them and they take care of us. An interesting point there, just on the timeline of this chapter, of course, is that in the novels, I mean, Arya is not actually back already. Obara says that she is currently, I think, coming down the Princess Path, and she tells
thousands gathering.
There's people going up there to meet her, basically, but
escort the bones of Oberyn.
But time.
They said this already. Everyone has jetpacks. We don't see it, but there's a jetpack around the corner, and I guess.
So I mean, the idea is, because as we saw in the chapter that I read from, the news has just arrived in Dorne.
Yeah.
And for her to arrive at the same time as Swiss Music, they've been sitting there on it for a while, and let's not look too closely, I guess, is the idea.
Yeah, so that's it. The praise for Alexander again, and the location is great, and also just it would have been nice to see children. I mean, obviously they have the children and they're seeing Tristane and Marcella, so it's not quite the same thing, but at least it's a little nod to that.
Oh God, yes, we see Tristane and Marcella, who are much too old, and well, they aged them up quite considerably.
Okay, what's next? Meereen. That's another area we discussed already in our highs. We quite liked it. The narrative they presented, the council. Two bits we didn't discuss. Barristan's warning and plea with the Mad King story. So you have him telling her, he was mad. He really was. It's not lies.
With some odd phrasings about the
country
country sort of rising up against him or whatever. Which it wasn't like there was the commoners. For the most part, the commoners were actually pretty happy with. They weren't unhappy because he wasn't going around murdering.
Most of his violence, most of his
were directed towards nobles.
Were directed towards nobility. The people, the subjects that he felt were a threat. He didn't really think commoners and peasants were threats to him. And we see
the peasants are always revolting.
In the Clash of Kings, when Arya is held prisoner by Gregor Clegane and his men, and they're being marched over prisoners, there's an old man who says he's all for Joffrey and things have gone to hell since Robert came to the throne. It was all wonderful and peace and plenty in a time of Aerys, the Mad King, which is, and I mean, if you read The World of Ice and Fire, we discuss Aerys's raid, and Aerys is a problematic person. He isn't crazy, but he had Tywin to rule for him, and in a lot of ways, Tywin was able to keep things on an even keel, and
that's all that matters really. Unless you have a all-out war, the commoners are probably gonna do pretty well.
So long as the harvests are coming in and they're not getting taxed too much, they don't have high expectations in life. They don't have high goals. So long as their minimum desires are met,
they prefer to not have people rampaging through their fields and raping their daughters and
taking their sons away to fight and die,
taking all their food and such. So,
so it was cool.
But it was really nice to finally have some of Barristan's lessons for Dany.
And the other thing, obviously, is the really great computer graphics for Drogon when Dany is sort of after the aftermath of the execution and the riot. She's obviously feeling lost, like she's like things are getting away from her and she doesn't know what to do. And Drogon is there and there's a moment of just joy and happiness, and then as she's reaching, pulls away and spreads his wings, takes off, and that's obviously a very clear symbol that she's kind of losing it. She's losing her grip on Meereen, and she's losing her grip on the people. She's losing her way, and as she loses her way, she loses her dragons. So that is very much keeping with the novels as well. There was a nice image, and it just again highlights just how amazing the visual effect. I remember being amazed by a CGI dragon, and I think it was like on Xena or The Adventures of Hercules or something, and so, or maybe it was Merlin, the Merlin miniseries. Sam Neill, was there a dragon in that one?
Yes, I think so.
And certainly the recent one I saw a dragon, and it's the vast difference in what they're able to do. Obviously, they have more money than those shows had, but it's just I mean, it is really film level.
I still want one.
Yeah. That said,
convincingly real.
So that was really, really impressive. Okay. And then we're on the wall, and this is the library scene. I said it. They're gonna be using the library again, and they did, like, right off the bat.
Yeah.
I expect we'll be seeing it a bit more because I have suspicions about why it exists.
And because they didn't go into detail about why this mattered, why is Sam looking up these details, and why we're just getting this one name thrown out? Oh, because they could make a funny, weird joke, which makes no sense, because where has she seen an ostrich?
But where would you even have heard of an ostrich? I don't get it.
So it just seems pointless to have that detail out there.
The scene is largely about, I think, I mean, it's a nice little character scene for Shireen being nice and sweet and trying to help.
We've already seen.
But we've seen this. Are we going to maybe play more about her friendship with Gilly and Sam somehow? We can't say. We haven't seen. We've only seen 4 episodes ourselves, so we can't say. Maybe. Grayscale. That's the main thing I took out of it. The reference of a grayscale, which I think they're starting to bring up more. Yes. And I have suspicions for why.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, but that's for later episodes to discuss.
But it's a little bit of a problem, I felt, in that the closest thing that Gilly sort of could be called is she's kind of a semi-wildling, I suppose. She's not quite a wildling, but I think there's a lot of, I mean, Craster had a lot of contact with the wildlings.
The fact that she doesn't know what to call grayscale. I mean, the
because
wildlings.
the wildlings are actually very superstitious about it and very frightened of it. They call it the Grey Death.
Yeah.
And in the novel, there's a character, who talks about Shireen, and she says she's dead basically.
Yeah.
The girl she's going to die, and she could be spreading it, and it doesn't matter that it looks like they think they've cured it, but it doesn't happen. You don't cure the Grey Death.
So I don't know. And then you have Selyse come in and obviously be the same Selyse we've seen in the prior seasons. So that wasn't. Really
Where does the Stannis and Jon scene? That one falls before? Or
that'll be following after, and we'll be discussing that one next.
Yes.
And then Jon. Let's cover Jon in general. But first up, obviously, we have the Stannis and Jon scene, which is a good scene. And again,
I like them together.
They're working really well together. I think Harrington is really rising to a challenge. Delane is a really good actor, and Harrington is really giving it back. I think what you get out of it, I think Harrington has been saying this in interviews, his character has seen a lot, suffered through a lot, done his duty, has been a leader. He's done having older people treat him as if he's still a kid. He wants a place at the table. He doesn't want to be talked down to. So you can see when Stannis is trying to tell him, oh, you want to be feared, because they will follow you. And you can see that Jon is just kind of, okay, that's what you say. And he's not necessarily agreeing with it. I think, and I like that aspect. I like the idea that Jon he has to stand on his own 2 feet now. He's done it. He's proven himself. He doesn't have to prove it to anyone anymore. And he doesn't have to be a student. I mean, not that I think this means he will be entirely closed-minded and refusing advice, but I don't think people can just assume just because he's younger than them that he will adhere to whatever they want him to do. As this episode shows, he determines to turn down the offer. It's a much easier offer. I mean, it's a much harder offer to turn down in some ways, because in the book, it comes with a couple of caveats. He has to take up the lore, and to prove that he's done it, he has to burn the gods wood at Winterfell. So there's this whole struggle, like, I really want Winterfell, but can I give up the gods of my father? Can I give up?
But there's also the problem of them planning season to season. Again, showing that here. How could he even consider it when he knows that Bran is alive? Which he doesn't know in the books. He would never think of...
I honestly admit, I don't remember if he informs... No, he'd never see. Well, wait, he doesn't know Bran is alive. Bran knows Jon is around, but Bran doesn't go to him. He saw the wolf, but he doesn't know that Bran was there. I forgot this. So,
true.
So he doesn't know. So that's not really a problem.
But he could have a strong reason to suspect. He has no reason to think he's dead, at least.
I'm not even sure he saw the wolf, to be honest. Well, I mean, everyone says he's dead. I mean...
Yeah, fair enough.
No, you're right. No, that's true. What they've done is they've had Bran almost talk to Jon, and that felt a little weird, but they didn't actually go to him.
Yeah.
So Jon is still not in the know, and... No, wait, but Samwell tells him.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I thought it was a scene... Samwell, yes, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry, I remember. Samwell tells him, whereas in the book, he's sworn to secrecy and he keeps his mouth shut.
Can't keep all these changes straight.
Yes, it's I've got the books really well in my head, but the TV show, so fine. Samwell tells him as soon as they meet, like, oh, I saw Brad, and then the whole mission was actually partly so. Where will we go?
They're gonna run into Crasters.
Yes, well, where are we gonna go? Well, we'll try and go to the villages. Like, going towards the wildlings sounds like a great plan to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And so that's, yes, exactly. So yes, he knows Bran is alive, or at least he has strong suspicion, reason to believe that Bran is alive. So that is weird. I love
nice for the letter, though.
Yeah, nice for the letter, the Anna Mormont. They make her Lady of Bear Island. She actually has older sisters in the novel. But and I wish they had written Stark in all caps, kind of like maybe a couple underlines just to emphasize it. But it's a great bit. It's a nice addition, I think. But Jon kind of can't help but smile.
Yeah.
And then Stannis gets grumpy about that. But that's not from the book. But it's a great little touch. I enjoyed that. The election was.
That's where we needed some of those minutes.
we could have used those bits there. I mean, they could have introduced Cotter Pike. They could have made it more complicated. They could have. And Sam, the thing is, it reduces Sam's role. Sam is very key to what happens, with some nudging and advice from Maester Aemon.
Yeah.
In the novel, some of you know, some of you don't. There's the two main candidates are Cotter Pike, Dennis Mallister, and then third is Janos Slynt, not Alistair Thorne. And there's a deadlock because Mallister and Pike hate one another. The partisans strongly support the guys they follow, and they will never vote for one another. So the idea is that the deadlock continues. They'll probably eventually throw their votes to Janos. And neither of them are really keen to do it. And Samuel goes to each of them separately and says, well, what if... And he talks to them each of the kind of person that they would like to see as Lord Commander if they can be Lord Commander. So to Dennis Mallister, who's this noble, aristocratic man, he talks to someone who was the son of Eddard Stark, raised in Winterfell, trained by, taught by maesters, trained by masters at arms.
He basically sells his candidate to both of them.
And then to Cotter Pike, who is this bastard from the Iron Islands, this rough, gruff guy with an axe, tough guy. Talks about a guy who's proven himself in arms, who defended the wall, who's kicked the ass of wildlings. And then when it comes to it, and then there's one final twist when at the end, they're preparing to start the votes, and they open this cauldron. They have a lid off this cauldron where everyone's cast their tokens in, and Mormont's raven jumps out and lands on the table and looks around and quirks and he's snow, and then walks over and flaps up and lands on Jon's shoulder. And that kind of suddenly there's this stream. Everyone says that's a sign. Jon Snow. And Jon Snow is elected in a landslide.
I mean, I haven't actually looked at any of the reactions so far. Before I didn't want to do that before we did this, but I would imagine that there are people disappointed about missing that moment because it is quite much more momentous in the novels. It feels much more like a big victory for Jon.
Yeah.
And of course, it comes at the end of a novel.
It comes at the end. So then, Jon says, "Well, I have to go meet the king and disappoint him." This is the first thing as Lord Commander to disappoint him. Say, I'm not.
So the timing, of course, doesn't do it in a favor. It is not ideal.
I mean, maybe it would have been too much. It would have been too many minutes. Mind you, this was a really short episode. It's like 52, 53 minutes, I think. So maybe 55. I don't remember how long it was. It felt short. And maybe if they had just said, let's spend more time on it. It's not necessary. It does what it sets out to do. And maybe they really did have to be economical. And so it's fine. But it could have been better. A bit. It could have just been nicer, fuller, richer thing to look at. And Sam would have had a much more prominent role. So I think that's... And that is it. We've managed to finish. Oh, I'll mention just briefly, Owen Teal. I enjoyed his performance as Alistair Thorne. I've always liked him. But yeah, that's it. We've covered everything. Highs and lows. Next episode, next week, will be... High Sparrow, so we'll be meeting Jonathan Pryce's character and seeing more things going on in King's Landing and other areas. So until next week, enjoy.